The endless night of the void stretched beyond reckoning, an ocean of darkness speckled with dying stars and crumbling worlds. Galaxies spun like ancient dancers whose steps faltered with the weight of unseen sorrow. Somewhere in the vast silence, the remnants of a once mighty empire flickered, its light fading, its legacy unraveling like ashes on the wind. This was the twilight of an age, where even God seemed to hesitate, and the void whispered secrets meant only for the doomed. We hold you close in our thoughts, for you are not merely a witness, but a companion on this path through shadows. Before the story unfolds, tell us, where in the world are you watching from, and what time is it there? Now, cradle your coffee, steady your breath, and journey with us into the heart of darkness. The empire at the center of this tale was one built on iron will and boundless ambition. Its ruler was no ordinary man, but a primarch, crafted by the emperor's hand, forged for greatness. Fulgrim, the Phoenician scion, was a vision of perfection. His every movement was poetry, every decision a stroke on the canvas of destiny. The galaxy marveled at his brilliance, his beauty, and the legion that followed him with fierce loyalty. Yet beneath the surface, Fulgrim's soul was a battleground. His ambition burned like a star about to supernova, radiant but dangerous in its intensity. He sought not just victory, but transcendence. To be more than flesh and bone. To grasp immortality not only in life but in legend. But such desires carried shadows, whispers that crept in the dark corners of his mind, telling tales of power that came with a price. It was during the siege of a distant world, under skies stained crimson by war, that Fulgrim first felt the stirrings of doubt. His legion fought with relentless fury, crushing the enemies of the Imperium beneath thunderous artillery and the roar of bolters. Yet as victory drew near, a cold whisper slithered into his thoughts. Was this triumph enough? Was conquest the measure of greatness, or merely a stepping stone towards something beyond? In quiet moments, he found himself gazing at the stars, their cold light reflecting the fractures within his heart. The weight of command pressed heavily, and the burden of expectation twisted like chains around his spirit. He began to question not just his enemies, but those closest to him, their motives, their loyalty. Was he truly leading a legion of brothers, or was there a darkness growing among them? Amid the endless campaigns and battles, a shadow crept into Fulgrim's life, a figure cloaked in allure and mystery. This being spoke of forbidden knowledge, of pleasures and powers hidden beyond the grasp of mortal men. It promised a path to transcendence, a way to escape the fragile limits of flesh and time. The Prince of Perfection found himself drawn to this seductive voice, torn between duty to the Emperor and the tantalizing call of something greater. The internal conflict consumed him like wildfire, each choice fracturing his soul further. He stood at a crossroads where loyalty battled desire and the future of an empire hung in the balance. Around him, the galaxy burned with the fires of war, but the most devastating battle was one waged within. The seeds of betrayal took root in silent moments, watered by ambition and doubt, and as the empire's foundations trembled, a storm gathered, one that would change the course of history and summon a god of excess into the waking world. Fulgrim's journey had only just begun, but the die was cast. The price of greatness, the cost of immortality, and the cruel embrace of destiny awaited him. The stars shuddered. The empire's fate wavered like a flickering flame against the void, and the whisper of Slaanesh grew ever louder. Beneath the hollow echoes of war, the forge of fate continued its relentless labor. The crimson skies over Chemos bore witness to a legion divided, their banners torn between allegiance and temptation. Fulgrim, the luminous beacon of perfection, moved among his warriors with grace born of both command and artistry. Yet his eyes, once alight with unshakable purpose, now held shadows, faint, elusive, but undeniable. We hold you near as this tale deepens. Before we journey further, where do you watch from now, and what time graces your world? With that settled, let the cadence of fate draw you deeper into the heart of this galactic tempest. The days following the siege were marked not by triumphant celebration, but by quiet murmurs and glances laden with unspoken truths. Among the ranks of the Emperor's finest, seeds of discord had taken root. Allies who once stood shoulder to shoulder now harbored doubts, their loyalty strained by the invisible hand of corruption. At the center of this gathering storm stood Lucius, Fulgrim's most trusted captain, a warrior whose loyalty was as legendary as his skill with the blade. Yet even Lucius was not immune to the subtle shift in the wind. His admiration for Fulgrim was tempered by unease. The prince's growing obsession with perfection and the mysterious whispers that followed him like a shadow. In the privacy of the command hall, where light struggled against the encroaching gloom, Fulgrim wrestled with the twin spectres of doubt and desire. His mind was a tempest, torn between the oath sworn to the Emperor and the seductive promises that flickered at the edges of his vision. The enigmatic figure, neither fully friend nor foe, had spoken of transcending mortality, of unlocking the true potential buried within the soul. It was a siren's call that resonated deeply within him, feeding a hunger that no victory could satisfy. Conversations with his legion revealed fractures previously unseen. Some whispered of loyalty above all, of unwavering faith in the Emperor's plan. Others, however, spoke in hushed tones of change, of a future unbound by old dogmas, where power and pleasure entwined, in a dance as eternal as the stars themselves. Fulgrim's closest confidant, the Primarch's advisor and artist, was among the first to notice the shift. She saw the toll the internal battle exacted, a prince torn between his radiant ideals and the creeping shadows. In stolen moments, she urged caution, reminding him that even the brightest flame could be extinguished by overreaching ambition. Yet Fulgrim's heart beat to a rhythm all his own, drawn toward a destiny fraught with peril. Each decision etched deeper scars upon his soul. Every whispered promise from the dark realm of Slaanesh pulled him further from the light, threading the needle of his fate with threads of silk and poison. The bonds between brothers strained beneath the weight of these unseen wars. Lucius, torn between admiration and fear, began to question his own place in the unfolding tragedy. Loyalties wavered, trust fractured. The Legion, once a unified force, became a battlefield of its own, a mirror to the chaos threatening the stars beyond. As Fulgrim's gaze turned inward, the galaxy itself seemed to hold its breath. The storm gathering on the horizon was no longer only of guns and fire, but of hearts betrayed and promises broken. The Prince of Perfection stood at the edge of an abyss, his reflection fractured in the shards of a destiny yet unfulfilled. In the silence before the storm, the whisper grew louder, the call of excess, the promise of immortality at a cost few could bear. Fulgrim faced a choice: to embrace the darkness and ascend, or to hold fast to the fading light and risk losing everything. The Empire watched, the stars waited, and the dance with a god had begun. Chapter 3. Complete Lichna. Word count por Dena. ChatGPT said, the galaxy lay shrouded beneath a veil of stars, distant and cold, while the fires of ambition burned fiercely within the heart of Fulgrim. His legion, once a symphony of unity and purpose, now echoed with discordant notes, each whisper and glance carrying the weight of secrets that threatened to unravel them all. In the endless expanse of space, the smallest tremor could become a cataclysm. We keep you close as the tale unfolds, for your presence shapes this journey. Before we proceed, tell us, where in your world do you listen now, and what time marks your sky? With your coffee ready, we step deeper into the labyrinth of desire and betrayal. The Prince of Perfection found himself haunted by visions, visions not born of the flesh, but conjured by a voice that slithered into his thoughts like a shadow coiling around his heart. This voice spoke of power beyond reckoning, of ecstasies unbound by mortal law, and of a path that led to divinity at a terrible cost. Fulgrim's internal struggle intensified. Each day, the line between duty and temptation blurred. His advisors noticed the strain beneath his flawless facade, the moments when his gaze faltered, or when his laughter held a hollow ring. Yet none dared challenge this Primarch, whose name was synonymous with glory. Amid the cold corridors of the flagship, Fulgrim sought solace in art, a refuge where beauty might still hold meaning. He sculpted, painted, and composed, attempting to trap fleeting perfection in form. But even these creations bore the mark of his turmoil, twisting into shapes both sublime and grotesque. Lucius watched with growing alarm. The captain's faith in his Primarch wavered, torn between unwavering loyalty and the fear that Fulgrim's soul was slipping into shadow. Their conversations grew terse, laden with unspoken fears and warnings veiled as counsel. In a rare moment of vulnerability, Fulgrim confided in his closest companion, a seer gifted with glimpses beyond the veil of reality. She spoke of the warp's tides, the chaotic currents where the god Slaanesh stirred, eager to claim those who strayed too close. Her words were a warning and a prophecy entwined. The path Fulgrim trod was perilous, and the price would be steep. Yet the allure was undeniable. The promise of transcending mortality, of seizing the divine, called to the deepest recesses of his being. The whispering god was no mere spectre. It was a tempest of desire and ruin, and Fulgrim stood poised between surrender and resistance. Elsewhere, shadows gathered among the legion. Rivalries kindled in the fires of jealousy and fear. Subtle machinations began to weave, alliances shifting like sand beneath the tides of war. The seeds of betrayal, planted in silence, began to sprout, threatening to choke the light from the Empire's heart. The galaxy itself seemed to pulse with anticipation. Stars dimmed as if mourning the innocence lost, and distant worlds braced for the coming storm. The fate of millions rested not on the edge of a blade, but in the fragile balance of a prince's soul. As Fulgrim's internal battle raged, the external world marched toward chaos. The choices made in quiet chambers would echo through the ages, shaping the rise and fall of empires. The whisper of Slaanesh grew louder still, promising ecstasy and ruin entwined, a song both beautiful and deadly. The dance of desire and duty had reached a new crescendo, and the galaxy held its breath. The weight of eternity pressed upon Fulgrim's shoulders as the stars whispered secrets in the void, cold and indifferent. His reflection in polished obsidian panels showed a man caught between brilliance and shadow, a prince whose quest for perfection was both his crown and his cage. Around him, the galaxy churned, its fate entwined with his own fragile resolve. We cherish your presence on this voyage through darkness. Before we move forward, where in your corner of the world do you watch from now? And what hour holds your time? Let your coffee warm your hands once more as we delve deeper into the spiral of ambition and betrayal. The aftermath of distant battles left scars not only on planets but etched deep into the hearts of those who survived. Among Fulgrim's legion, unrest simmered. Whispers of dissent fluttered through the ranks like shadows at dusk, as loyalties bent and strained under unseen pressures. The once unified legion now stood fractured, each fracture a reflection of the turmoil within their Primarch. In this fracturing, Fulgrim found both isolation and temptation. His closest companions grew wary, their eyes searching for the man they once knew beneath the mask of radiant authority. Conversations grew terse. Trust became a currency scarce and precious. Lucius, ever the vigilant sentinel, sensed the widening gulf and fought to anchor his Primarch to the ideals they once swore to uphold. Yet the whispers from the dark grew louder, seductive, unrelenting. They spoke of a path beyond mortal chains, a gateway to eternal glory and pleasure. The figure that haunted Fulgrim's dreams, neither fully flesh nor spirit, promised transcendence at a cost that chilled his soul. But the price shimmered like starlight, dazzling, elusive, irresistible. In stolen moments, Fulgrim sought refuge in beauty, ornate sculptures and melodies that captured fleeting perfection. Yet even these were tinged with an unsettling discord, as if his very soul strained against the bounds of creation. His art became a mirror of his unraveling mind, a dance of light and shadow in endless conflict. The seer, whose visions pierced the veil between realities, offered counsel cloaked in sorrow. She spoke of the warped storms, of gods hungry for souls who dared to grasp for divinity. Her warnings were clear. To follow the whisper was to walk a path where salvation and damnation intertwined. The internal tempest raged, mirrored by external strife. Other legions watched, wary and silent, sensing the coming storm, but powerless to halt its advance. Rivalries festered, loyalties faltered, and the fabric of the Imperium strained under the mounting tension. Amidst this, Fulgrim's heart beat to a rhythm of its own, a rhythm both beautiful and destructive. He grappled with the desire to seize godhood, to transcend flesh and time, even as a part of him clung to the fading light of duty and honor. The galaxy seemed to hold its breath, suspended between dawn and dusk, as the Prince of Perfection stood at the precipice of transformation or ruin. The whispers of Slaanesh became a roar, an irresistible siren song promising ecstasy and oblivion intertwined. Fulgrim faced the abyss, and the choice that would shape the destiny of countless worlds. The dance continued, more urgent now, as stars blinked and faltered in the growing darkness. The void beyond the stars held its breath, silent witness to the slow unraveling of a legend. Fulgrim, once the shining paragon of the Emperor's will, now walked a path shrouded in shadow and seduction. The perfect prince, whose every step had once inspired awe, was now caught in a web of desires far older and darker than even the oldest Xenos could fathom. We hold you dear as this saga deepens. Before we continue, where do you listen now? And what hour graces your world? Let your coffee soothe the weight of the cosmos as we peer further into the heart of temptation and betrayal. The halls of the flagship echoed with a hollow silence, broken only by the soft footsteps of those who dared approach the Primarch's chambers. Inside, Fulgrim sat surrounded by his art, fragile and exquisite manifestations of beauty, but his eyes were distant, haunted by a storm raging beneath his calm exterior. His legion, once bound by unbreakable loyalty, now whispered in shadows. Murmurs of doubt and fear grew louder, carried by those who sensed the change within their leader. Lucius, the loyal captain, struggled to reconcile the radiant warrior he revered with the man succumbing to an insidious darkness. Fulgrim's nights were plagued by visions, glimpses of the god Slaanesh, whose form shimmered with both allure and menace. The god's voice was a melody woven from silk and venom, promising transcendence, power, and pleasures beyond mortal comprehension. It spoke not in commands, but in seduction, tempting the Primarch to surrender the fragile chains of flesh for eternity. Despite the warnings of the seer and the counsel of his advisors, Fulgrim found himself drawn ever closer to the edge. The pursuit of perfection had become a hunger that gnawed at his soul, consuming all doubts and fears in its blaze. The Legion sensed the shift, bonds frayed. Eyes that once looked to their Primarch for guidance now glanced sideways with suspicion. In whispered conversations, seeds of rebellion took root, watered by fear and uncertainty. Loyalties were tested as the internal battle spilled into the ranks. Meanwhile, the galaxy groaned under the weight of war and impending chaos. Worlds burned, alliances shattered, and the fabric of order frayed at the seams. Yet none of these external fires matched the inferno-consuming Fulgrim's spirit. In one fateful moment, Fulgrim stood before a relic, an artifact said to contain the essence of an ancient power. It pulsed with a dark light, calling to him with promises that chilled and thrilled in equal measure. The choice lay bare: embrace the darkness and ascend beyond mortality, or reject the temptation and cling to a fading humanity. His hand trembled, hovering between salvation and ruin. The echoes of his decision would resound across time and space, shaping the fate of empires and the souls of millions. As the stars dimmed and the galaxy held its breath, Fulgrim's journey toward damnation or redemption took its most pivotal step. The whisper of Slaanesh was no longer distant. It was the storm on the horizon, gathering strength and hunger. The dance of light and shadow spiraled onward, relentless and eternal. In the hollow silence that stretched between stars, the weight of Fulgrim's choice pressed like a storm gathering behind the horizon. The once radiant Primarch now moved with a grace touched by shadows, his every breath a battle between the remnants of honor and the seductive promises of oblivion. Around him, the galaxy trembled, not from the roar of weapons, but from the silent unraveling of a soul. We hold you close in this quiet moment. Before the story winds onward, tell us, where do you watch from now, and what time marks your world? Steady your coffee, draw in a slow breath, and prepare to step deeper into the folds of destiny. The Legion felt the shift keenly, like a subtle tremor before the quake. Whispers grew into murmurs, loyalty into suspicion. Lucius, once the steadfast shadow to Fulgrim's light, found his faith tested by the growing gulf between the Primarch and his men. Conversations once filled with camaraderie turned cold, edged with unspoken fears and guarded glances. In the sanctum of his chambers, Fulgrim wrestled with visions that twisted like serpents around his mind. Slaanesh's voice, a melody of torment and desire, promised release from the chains of flesh, a gateway to immortality bathed in ecstasy and ruin. The god's allure was intoxicating, its embrace both a balm and a blade. Despite the growing darkness, a flicker of doubt remained. Memories of brotherhood, of duty to the Emperor, echoed faintly beneath the cacophony of temptation. This internal conflict tore at Fulgrim, each moment a fracturing of the self, a dance of light and shadow in perpetual struggle. Outside, the galaxy's wounds festered. Worlds burned beneath endless wars, alliances fractured like brittle glass. The Imperium's grip weakened as internal strife gnawed at its heart. Yet these external battles paled against the silent war within a single soul. Among the Legion, fractures deepened. Some whispered of loyalty, desperate to anchor themselves to fading ideals. Others, seduced by promises of change and power, began to weave webs of their own ambition. Betrayal simmered beneath the surface, waiting for the right moment to shatter bonds forged in blood. Fulgrim's art, once a sanctuary of beauty, became darker, a twisted mirror reflecting his fractured mind. Sculptures twisted into grotesque forms, melodies warped into haunting dirges. His perfection was no longer pristine, but jagged and raw, echoing the turmoil within. The seer's warnings echoed in his ears, a prophecy of doom and salvation intertwined. To walk the path of Slaanesh was to embrace both godhood and annihilation, to lose oneself in a whirlwind of pleasure and pain, from which there was no return. As the stars flickered uncertainly, Fulgrim stood on the edge of irrevocable change. His next steps would not only seal his fate but ripple across the cosmos, altering the destinies of countless worlds. The whisper of Slaanesh surged into a roar, a tempest of desire and destruction. The dance neared its climax, the final moves poised between transcendence and ruin. The galaxy watched in silent agony. Beneath skies rent by distant nova firestorms, the galaxy trembled as tides of war and chaos surged like a tempest without mercy. Empires crumbled like ancient stone beneath the weight of ambition and treachery, while stars bled cold light into the void. Yet amid this cosmic upheaval, a more intimate battle raged. One waged not on planets scorched by war, but within the fractured heart of a Primarch named Fulgrim. We hold you in our thoughts as the story's shadows deepen. Before we press onward, tell us, where in your world do you watch now, and what hour frames your night or day? With your coffee by your side, let us descend further into the storm of desire and despair. The legions marched across star systems, leaving devastation in their wake, yet their unity frayed with each passing campaign. Fulgrim's once commanding presence now flickered between light and darkness, a beacon struggling against the encroaching night. His internal torment cast ripples through his followers. Cracks in their loyalty widened like fractures spreading beneath ice. Lucius, burdened by conflicted duty, found himself torn between unwavering loyalty and the gnawing dread that his Primarch was slipping beyond redemption. Their private exchanges, once warm and steadfast, became terse confrontations laden with veiled threats and desperate pleas. The bond between leader and captain strained, echoing the fracture widening within the Legion itself. Amid the shifting tides, a hidden faction rose, those seduced by Slaanesh's promise of ecstasy and power, who whispered in shadows and dealt in secrets. They moved like phantoms, weaving webs of influence and treachery, their loyalty pledged to neither Emperor nor Primarch, but to the insatiable god of excess. Fulgrim's own body and mind were no longer his alone. The god's influence seeped into his flesh through ancient rituals and dark pacts whispered in the void. His once flawless skin bore subtle marks, sigils that pulsed faintly beneath the surface like a heartbeat of corruption. His voice carried a new cadence, a hypnotic allure that ensnared those who listened. Beneath the surface of galactic war, psychological battles grew more fierce. Allies became adversaries. Trust turned to suspicion. The line between friend and foe blurred as ambition and fear intertwined in a deadly dance. The galaxy's great cities and shining worlds felt the tremors of this inner war. Prophets and seers across the stars whispered of a reckoning. an upheaval born not of mere conquest, but of souls lost to temptation and ruin. The tides of fate surged relentlessly forward, carrying all toward an inevitable clash. Fulgrim's resolve shattered further with each step down this dark path. Yet in the depths of his soul, a flicker of defiance remained, a fragile ember fighting against the consuming flame. The choice before him was no longer abstract but visceral. Embrace the god's eternal embrace and ascend to damnation, or claw back toward the fading light of his origins. The stage was set for a confrontation that would echo through time. Betrayals would shatter bonds. Sacrifices would stain the stars. The cost of desire was counted in blood and broken dreams. The whisper of Slaanesh grew deafening, an irresistible summons weaving together ecstasy and oblivion. The dance of fate quickened, drawing all toward the final act. The stars watched, unblinking, as destinies converged. The void itself seemed to pulse with a dark heartbeat, each beat echoing through the shattered remnants of star systems and broken alliances. The once glorious legions of the Emperor marched through the chaos, their banners tattered but their resolve hardened. Yet beneath the surface, a rot spread like shadowed poison, infecting hearts and minds alike. Amid this dissonance, Fulgrim stood poised between divinity and damnation, the scales tipping ever closer toward the abyss. We hold you close as this saga unfolds. Before we continue, tell us, where do you watch from, and what hour marks your world? With your coffee warming your hands, let us step deeper into the spiraling dance of desire, betrayal, and fate. Fulgrim's transformation was no longer a secret whispered in corridors. It was a force palpable and unavoidable. The Primarch, whose beauty was once the very embodiment of perfection, now carried an otherworldly aura, both intoxicating and terrifying. His eyes, once clear and commanding, shimmered with an unsettling light, reflecting the influence of Slaanesh's insidious touch. Among the Legion, divisions deepened. Some swore unwavering loyalty to their Primarch, believing in the vision of transcendence he now pursued. Others recoiled in fear and despair, their hearts torn between duty to the Emperor and the seductive promises of power. The battle lines were no longer drawn between legions, but within them. Lucius, ever the vigilant guardian, watched with growing dread as his Primarch slipped further into the embrace of darkness. His own faith wavered, not in the Emperor, but in the man he had once called brother. Quiet confrontations erupted into bitter arguments, their words sharp as blades, cutting at bonds forged in blood. In the shadows, agents of Slaanesh moved with lethal grace, weaving webs of influence that reached even into the highest echelons of power. Their rituals invoked pleasures and pains beyond mortal understanding, ensnaring those who dared to reach for forbidden knowledge. The corruption spread like wildfire, consuming all who tasted its intoxicating flames. Fulgrim's art, once a sanctuary of light and beauty, became a dark cathedral of excess and despair. Sculptures twisted into monstrous forms, melodies turned into haunting dirges that echoed through the corridors of his ship. His own body bore the marks of his transformation, sigils and runes pulsing with unholy energy beneath flawless skin. Yet within the tempest of his soul, a fragile ember of doubt flickered. Memories of brotherhood, honor, and the Emperor's grand design whispered to him like ghosts, urging resistance against the consuming tide. But each day, the whisper of Slaanesh grew louder, drowning out the fading light. Across the galaxy, the consequences of this internal war began to manifest. Battles were lost not to enemy fire, but to betrayal and fractured command. Entire worlds fell into chaos as legions fractured, their loyalties shattered by unseen poisons. The Imperium's foundations trembled as the darkness spread. Fulgrim's destiny hurtled toward an inevitable reckoning. The line between godhood and ruin blurred, and the cost of his ambition would be paid in blood and shattered dreams. The whisper of Slaanesh had become a roar, a call to ecstasy and annihilation intertwined. The dance of fate accelerated, drawing all toward the precipice. The stars gazed down, silent witnesses to the tragedy unfolding. The stars above burned cold and distant, silent sentinels to a galaxy unraveling at its seams. Beneath their indifferent gaze, the legions that once marched as a united force now fractured like brittle crystal, each shard reflecting the growing shadow of chaos. The name of Fulgrim, once a beacon of light and hope, became a whisper twisted by fear and awe, a herald of a new, darker era. We hold you close as the threads of this tale tighten. Before we continue, tell us, where in your world do you watch, and what hour marks your moment? With coffee in hand, prepare to journey deeper into a story where loyalty and betrayal entwine like serpents in a dance of death. Fulgrim's descent into the embrace of Slaanesh was no sudden fall, but a slow, inevitable spiral. His soul, once vibrant with purpose and pride, now bore the scars of endless temptation and internal war. The god of excess had claimed more than his body. It had ensnared his mind, twisting desires into chains that bound him tighter with each passing day. Within the legion, the rift grew wider. Brothers turned wary eyes upon one another, suspicion corroding bonds forged in blood and fire. Lucius, the captain who had once stood as the steadfast guardian of Fulgrim's honor, now grappled with a painful truth. The Primarch he served was slipping beyond salvation, lost in a maelstrom of decadence and despair. Secret gatherings convened in shadowed corners of warships and forgotten worlds, where whispers of rebellion and sedition grew bold. The call of Slaanesh's followers echoed through hidden halls, their promises of power and pleasure luring those who felt forgotten or betrayed by the old order. The legion fractured into factions, each vying for dominance as the spectre of betrayal loomed ever larger. Fulgrim himself became a figure both revered and feared, his presence intoxicating, his will unyielding yet consumed by a darkness that shimmered beneath his flawless exterior. His art grew ever more twisted, each creation a reflection of his shattered psyche, a haunting testament to beauty corrupted. A pivotal moment arrived beneath the blood-red moons of a forsaken world. There, amidst the ruins of a forgotten temple, Fulgrim confronted the reality of his transformation. The god Slaanesh revealed itself not as a distant whisper, but as a tempest of flesh and spirit, its embrace both excruciating and sublime. In that crucible, Fulgrim faced a harrowing choice: to surrender fully and ascend as the avatar of excess, or to resist and cling to the fragile remnants of his humanity. The decision would echo through the cosmos, shaping the fate of his legion and the very fabric of the Imperium. The galaxy held its breath as shadows deepened, and the dance of light and darkness spiraled toward its tragic crescendo. The whisper of Slaanesh was now a tempest, an irresistible call to ecstasy, destruction, and the dawn of a new corrupted age. The stars watched silently, bearing witness to the fall of a prince and the birth of a god's dominion. The shadows deepened across the galaxy, cloaking worlds in twilight as the inexorable march of destiny pressed forward. The once pristine banners of the Emperor's legions now bore the stains of betrayal and excess, their proud colours dulled by corruption's relentless hand. At the centre of this maelstrom stood Fulgrim, no longer merely a Primarch, but a living emblem of a tragedy writ large across the stars. We hold you close as the threads of this tale twist ever tighter. Before we proceed, tell us, where in your world do you watch, and what hour marks your vigil? With coffee in hand, prepare to delve deeper into the heart of ambition and ruin. Fulgrim's transformation was nearly complete. The god Slaanesh had woven its dark tapestry around his soul, binding him with chains of ecstasy and pain that blurred the boundaries between pleasure and torment. His once radiant visage now flickered with unnatural light, eyes burning with a fierce and terrible purpose. Within the Legion, the fractures grew into open wounds. Brothers who had fought side by side now faced one another with suspicion, their bonds shattered by the god's insidious influence. Lucius, torn between loyalty and despair, confronted Fulgrim in a final desperate attempt to reclaim the Primarch he once knew. Their confrontation was a tempest of words and steel, a battle not only for command, but for the very soul of the Legion. Lucius's blade struck with fury born of heartbreak, each parry and thrust a plea for redemption. Fulgrim's responses shimmered with both beauty and menace, a deadly dance choreographed by madness and sorrow. The tides of war roared outside, but the most devastating conflict raged within. As the clash reached its crescendo, Fulgrim revealed the depth of his transformation, a being no longer bound by mortal flesh, but a harbinger of excess, a vessel for the god's insatiable hunger. The Legion fractured irreparably in the wake of this battle. Some fell to the dark embrace, surrendering themselves to the god's will. Others fled, haunted by memories of a brother lost to madness. The Imperium trembled as news spread of Fulgrim's fall, a wound that cut deeper than any blade. Amid the ruins of loyalty and honor, the god Slaanesh's dominion expanded. Its whispers echoed in every shadow, promising power and oblivion to those bold enough to listen. The galaxy's fate hung precariously, balanced on the edge of ecstasy and destruction. Fulgrim's descent was no mere fall. It was a transformation that reshaped reality itself. The dance with the god had reached its darkest movement, and the stars awaited the final act. The whisper of Slaanesh became a roar, a symphony of ruin and rapture entwined. The saga spiraled toward its tragic climax, the fate of empires and souls intertwined in its wake. The galaxy trembled beneath the weight of a shattering truth, as the once great Legion, now twisted and fractured, became a crucible for ruin and revelation. The echo of Fulgrim's fall rippled through the stars, an elegy for a prince who had danced too close to darkness, and a warning to all who dared seek the god's forbidden embrace. We hold you close in this moment of unfolding fate. Before we proceed, tell us, where do you watch from now, and what time marks your world? With coffee steady in hand, prepare to journey deeper into the shadows that consume and define. In the wake of betrayal, the Legion splintered into factions warring for dominance and survival. Brothers once bound by blood now eyed each other as threats, their unity shattered like glass beneath the hammer of madness. Amidst this chaos, the servants of Slaanesh pressed their advantage, weaving new pacts and spreading corruption like a contagion that defied cure. Fulgrim himself had become more than man, more than Primarch, a being suffused with dark power, his form shifting like liquid light and shadow. The god's essence coursed through his veins, and with each breath he became both a tyrant and a tragic figure, a god made prisoner to his own ambition. Lucius, broken but unyielding, led the remnants who refused to succumb. His blade, stained by countless battles, sought vengeance not only on external foes, but within the fractured Legion. His internal conflict mirrored the wider war, a desperate struggle between loyalty, grief, and the haunting desire to reclaim what was lost. Across the galaxy, worlds burned and fell, torn between the Imperium's faltering grip and the insidious advance of chaos. The stars seemed to weep as ancient prophecies fulfilled themselves in blood and fire. The fate of many rested on fragile alliances and whispered betrayals, each choice a step closer to ruin or redemption. In the heart of the storm, Fulgrim's mind flickered with remnants of memory, fragments of brotherhood, honor, and the light that once guided him. These glimpses were fleeting, swallowed quickly by the relentless tide of excess and power that defined his new existence. The dance between light and shadow reached its crescendo as the god and the Primarch became indistinguishable, both prisoner and master in a tragic symphony. The cost of ambition was writ large across the stars, a legacy etched in sacrifice and sorrow. The whisper of Slaanesh echoed louder still, a promise and a curse intertwined, calling forth the final acts of a saga that would shape the destiny of empires and souls alike. The stars bore silent witness to a tragedy beyond reckoning. The dance neared its final heartbreaking steps. The galaxy shuddered beneath the weight of unspoken horrors, as shadows deepened and alliances fractured beneath the inexorable tide of chaos. Worlds once shining with imperial glory now lay scarred and broken, their skies darkened by the smoke of betrayal and war. In this cosmic tempest, the fractured legion struggled, torn between loyalty and corruption, hope and despair. We hold you near as the tale's threads draw taut. Before we proceed, tell us, where do you watch from now, and what hour marks your world? With coffee warming your hands, prepare to descend further into the maelstrom of fate and sorrow. Fulgrim's transformation reached its zenith, a tragic apex of ambition and ruin. No longer merely a man or Primarch, he was a vessel of Slaanesh's will, a being whose form shimmered with unnatural beauty and terrible power. His presence twisted reality itself, bending the minds and wills of those who beheld him. The Legion's remnants fractured further, their bonds shattered by betrayal and madness. Lucius led those who clung to the fading light, but even his resolve wavered beneath the crushing weight of loss. Secret cabals of Slaaneshi devotees grew bolder, their rituals spreading like a blight across the stars, eroding hope with every whispered invocation. Across the war-torn expanse, battles raged, not just between armies, but within hearts and minds. Trust became a fragile illusion. Fear and suspicion poisoned even the closest bonds. The Imperium's grip loosened as chaos wove its dark tapestry through every corner of existence. In the silent chambers where once brotherhood thrived, Fulgrim contemplated the cost of his choices. Memories flickered, echoes of a time before shadows claimed him. He faced the bitter truth. Immortality granted by the gods was a prison forged from desire and despair, an eternal dance with ruin. The god Slaanesh's voice was a siren song, sweet, terrible, and unending. Fulgrim was both master and captive of this cruel melody, caught between the heights of divinity and the depths of annihilation. As stars dimmed and the galaxy held its breath, the fractured legion prepared for its final reckoning. Sacrifices would be made. Betrayals would rend the last threads of loyalty. The fate of empires hung in the balance, poised between salvation and oblivion. The whisper of Slaanesh grew into a storm, a tempest that would consume all in its path. The dance raced toward its tragic climax, the final act of a saga written in blood and shadow. The stars watched, cold and unyielding, as destinies converged toward inevitable ruin. The galaxy's silence shattered like glass beneath the storm of war and revelation. As worlds burned and shattered, the fractured legions stood on the brink of annihilation or redemption, their fate intertwined with the prince who had become both savior and destroyer. Fulgrim's path had led him to the precipice, where the final act would be writ in blood and sorrow. We hold you close as the echoes of this tale thunder through the cosmos. Before we move onward, tell us, where do you watch from now, and what hour graces your world? With your coffee steady, prepare to witness the reckoning of gods and men. In the heart of a shattered battlefield, beneath skies torn by fire and despair, Fulgrim faced the remnants of his legion. Betrayal had cut deep. Brother turned against brother in desperate struggle. The god Slaanesh's influence pulsed like a dark heartbeat, warping flesh and mind alike. Lucius, scarred but unbroken, stood before his fallen Primarch, his blade both weapon and plea. Their confrontation was a tempest of emotions, a clash of loyalty, grief, and rage. Words fell like thunder, steel sang a sorrowful dirge, and beneath it all, a desperate hope for salvation flickered. Fulgrim's form shimmered with unholy light, the god's power entwined with his very being. Yet within that blaze, a flicker of the man he once was still burned, a fragile ember fighting against the consuming darkness. His voice, at once haunting and regal, spoke of choices made and consequences borne. The battle that ensued was both physical and spiritual, a dance of fate that tore the legion asunder. Allies fell, sacrifices were made in the name of hope and survival. The cost was terrible, the wounds deep and lasting. As the dust settled, the legion was irrevocably changed, its unity shattered, its future uncertain. The galaxy itself seemed to mourn, stars flickering as if in sorrow for the fallen. Fulgrim's fate hung in the balance, caught between godhood and ruin, between eternal damnation and the faintest hope of redemption. The whisper of Slaanesh echoed in the void, a lament for a prince lost to ambition, a call to those who would follow or resist. The dance neared its heartbreaking finale. The stars bore silent witness to the fall and rise of empires. The galaxy groaned beneath the weight of its own unraveling, as the shattered remnants of a once mighty legion faced their final reckoning. The stars themselves seemed to dim in mournful silence, witnesses to a tragedy that stretched beyond time and space. Fulgrim, the fallen prince, stood at the nexus of fate and ruin, his soul a battlefield, where light and darkness warred in eternal conflict. We hold you close as the saga nears its end. Before we proceed, tell us, where in your world do you watch, and what hour marks your vigil? With coffee in hand, steady your breath, and prepare to witness the climax of ambition and despair. The legion's fractured forces converge beneath skies scorched by the fires of endless war. Battles raged not just for territory but for souls. Brothers fought brothers, each clash echoing the deeper war within Fulgrim himself. Loyalties shattered like glass, alliances forged in desperation and betrayal. Lucius, the steadfast sentinel, stood as a beacon of resistance amidst the chaos. His blade, stained by sacrifice, cut through darkness with unwavering resolve. Yet even he faced the agonizing choice between loyalty to a brother lost and the duty to a higher cause. Fulgrim's form had become a tempest of radiant agony and divine madness, a being both magnificent and monstrous. The god Slaanesh's influence writhed within him like a living storm, granting power beyond mortal ken, but demanding a price paid in torment and loss. In the heart of the final battle, choices were made that would echo across the ages. Sacrifices shattered the fragile threads of hope, and betrayals tore open wounds that might never heal. The line between salvation and damnation blurred, each step taken a descent or ascent along the spiral of fate. Fulgrim's voice, a haunting melody of regret and defiance, carried across the carnage. His final acts were a testament to the tragic weight of ambition, a desperate grasp at redemption intertwined with the inevitable embrace of ruin. The galaxy held its breath as the dance reached its crescendo. The final act where the prince's legacy would be sealed in shadow and blood. The whisper of Slaanesh surged into a roar, a symphony of destruction and beauty entwined. The stars watched, cold and eternal, as empires fell and heroes were forged in fire. The stars wept silent tears, their ancient light flickering like dying embers across a galaxy scarred by ambition and despair. The once glorious tapestry of empire lay in tatters, woven anew from threads of sacrifice, betrayal, and the haunting echoes of a prince lost to darkness. Fulgrim's story, etched in fire and shadow, reached its solemn conclusion, a lament for a soul torn between immortality and oblivion. We hold you close as this final chapter unfolds. Before we close the tale, tell us, where do you watch from now, and what hour marks your world? With coffee cradled in your hands, prepare to witness the end of an era and the birth of legend. The battlefield lay quiet, save for the whispers of the fallen and the distant hum of a universe in mourning. Fulgrim stood alone amidst the ruins, his form a radiant storm of light and shadow. The god Slaanesh's power both his crown and his chain. Immortality, once a coveted gift, revealed itself now as a prison forged from endless desire and eternal regret. His mind drifted through memories, fragments of brotherhood, moments of triumph and tragedy, the faces of those lost to the cruel tides of fate. Each echo was a scar etched upon his soul, a reminder that even gods bear the weight of consequence. The cost of ambition lay bare before him. Empires had risen and fallen beneath his gaze, stars had dimmed in the wake of his choices, and countless lives had been claimed by the dance with excess. Yet within the tempest of his being, a fragile hope endured, a whisper that perhaps redemption remained, even in the depths of ruin. Fulgrim's final act was not one of conquest, but of surrender, a relinquishing of power to the void that both consumed and defined him. The god's grasp loosened, and for a fleeting moment, the Primarch's true self surfaced, a tragic silhouette against the dying light. The galaxy held its breath as the stars blinked out one by one, the last flicker of an age fading into the endless night. The dance of light and shadow had ended, leaving behind a legacy carved in sorrow and splendor. The whisper of Slaanesh faded into silence, a mournful elegy to the price of immortality and the fall of a prince. The stars, eternal and cold, bore witness to the end, and to what might rise anew from the ashes.